Oh, welcome. If you've come here today, then you've chosen to educate yourself or maybe find something vaguely entertaining. Either way, I hope you find this presentation to be quite enjoyable. With that said, my name is David Kraft. Now we'll be presenting Alien Voices and Inner Dialogue towards a developmental account of verbal auditory hallucinations by Dr. Charles Fernyhough of the University of Durham in Durham, England. This will be a presentation for a neuroscience class at the Georgia Institute of Technology, so it will in fact be educational. But I hope you enjoy it, learn something, and with all of that behind me, welcome to Auditory Hallucinations. Is it madness? The answer is no. But the explanation for why it's not is complicated and, well, what I'll be getting into today. Auditory hallucinations, of course, are infamous, dealing with schizophrenia, snipers, all these really horrible things that ultimately end up breaking people that you hear about it in the news. So why is it not necessarily madness? Well, that's what Dr. Charles Fernyhough has spent a great deal of his career dealing with. And truth is the first person to realize that just hearing voices, hearing things that aren't necessarily yourself or from the outside world, it's not necessarily insanity. And the reason for that is 1001 yellow daffodils. That was weird. And the reason for that is because, well, the numbers don't lie. Over 14% of people, before they reach puberty, hear voices that are not the result of either their own perceived voice or the outside world. They are, in fact, hallucinations. Now, of course, you never hear about this 14% of children that don't hear about these voices because most of them are either written off as imaginary or, truth is, never amount to much because most of them disappear. But a lot of them don't. For about the 50% of the people that do from childhood, well, maintain it throughout their lives. Again, this is not a problem. So what if you hear a door open every once in a while, or a window crack, or a song that isn't necessarily being played? People just ignore it for the most part. Now, you may not necessarily believe what I've been telling you right now, but it's true. Or at least the latest evidence says it's true. Given that, well, let's go into why. I've already given you these numbers. So what causes these apparently not insane hallucinations? Well, there are two reasons, really, which I'll get into later, but first you must understand how normal auditory processing works. You see, when we're children, and I mean really young children, as infants, when we're first beginning to understand what speech is, what communication is, we have an internal process of internalization. It begins with babbling and just figuring out what different sounds are, how to process them. But once we get to we gain the capacity to actually speak and make sense with this speech, then we begin a four-step process of internalizing our own voice. The first step is, of course, conversation. Hearing people speak, speaking with them, learning from them, increasing vocabulary, and just understanding of the voice. The second step, well, is basically talking to yourself. You see kids playing around with toys, saying, having this G.I. Joe fight this dinosaur or whatever. And they are just narrating this little play fight of theirs. This is the second step. It's private speech. This ability to have a dialogue within your own mind, but it is still external. The third step is the first internal step. It's where this internal dialogue becomes internal, where you're reading to yourself or going through a list or studying or whatever, just normal internal conversation. The fourth step is the hardest to understand because it's pure concept. It's not necessarily language, but thoughts having pure meaning. Now, once we have all four of these steps understood, we can move into how hallucinations occur, theoretically, and what are the problem results. To begin with, second time. Now, to begin, and we begin with the less problematic of the two, which is the re-expansion model. In this, where you do this, your internal voice, that internal pure thought from stage 4 that I mentioned earlier, becomes something that's alien to you. This alien voice is from your own pure thought, is from your own stage 4 language processing, but it's manifesting as something you don't recognize as your own voice. This usually manifests as something that's saying sit down, eat, whatever. Relatively innocuous and not usually hugely problematic. These are the ones that tend to get ignored the most. The second type, at least the second theory of why these occur, is problems with the initial internalization of speech. Basically, as your own internal voice is being internalized, a second internal voice is being internalized at the same time. The idea here is that while your internal voice is recognized as yourself, a second internal voice may not necessarily be recognized as your own. Now, this idea tends to be more horrific to people. It's more problematic. But keep in mind, these are all theories. And, well, that's the problem with theories. They need to be tested. Now, of course, there have been tests, fMRI studies, EEG, and all of them have shown, while people are undergoing these hallucinations, that there is no problem. Now, we don't know why there is no problem, but... Okay, now that's getting weird. These fMRI and EEG studies don't see any difference between people experiencing auditory hallucinations and those that do. As a result, all these theories that I've spoken about and what these theories about what auditory hallucinations in fact are have yet to be proven and are very difficult to prove because the tests that we have that are meant to show differences in how these are processed don't show any huge difference. Now, given this, well, we just have to do more work. While the theories themselves do tend to be valid and correlate with observational studies already done by Dr. Charles Fernyhough and his associates, more work still needs to be done. Hope you've enjoyed this, and what the hell that keeps happening?
It finally happened. It finally happened. It finally happened.
It was unplugged.
I'm slightly mad.